Grant Miller here, Miami Community Newspapers, and it's the David Singer Show. Yeah, you heard it right, the David Singer Show. I'm just the host. This is David Singer. Tell a little about you.
Actually,
We got 30 minutes.
I would
to
rather
BS the whole
call
time.
it the Community Newspapers, 2 men and a bottle of water.
That's pretty good. Or
Hand sanitizer.
All right, 2 men in a bottle.
2 men and a bottle.
Okay, let's get right to it.
Okay.
Let's talk about the racism in America.
Okay, let's talk about racial profile.
Okay. Before we get there,
Okay.
the big issue now: are people upset about the writing, or are they upset about the injustice? Which one is not Miami, the world? And I really want to talk about when we get to it. Let's focus on South Florida as much as possible. Okay, racism in America. Go
Okay,
for it.
so
That's your camera.
That's my camera. So let's talk about the fact that as an individual, you and I, even though we're both Jewish, right, we'll never be able to walk in the same shoes as an African American.
Absolutely.
Okay? When we leave the house, nobody knows we're Jewish. Nobody.
Well, there's a reason why nobody
I don't
knows.
know.
We got,
Okay.
we won't
But
talk
you know
about
what I
our
mean.
features.
But the second an African American leaves the house, they automatically are known to be black. And there's no getting away from it, right?
You know, I have to interject so you know. It's like when I used to tell Cubans, we should lift the embargo. And they go to me, you don't understand. You don't understand. We lived it. As you say, the Afro-American, we don't know how they feel when they leave their house.
Absolutely not. And the only time we've ever gone through a period like that is through Germany, right? When the Germans made the Jews or other groups wear armbands. So they were recognizable on the street. Other than that, nobody really knows who we are.
Wait. So in Germany, when Hitler was marching through.
Correct. They made all the Jews wear armbands. So that to me is kind of like a point in reference to an African American who leaves and everybody knows that they're African American and automatically they're racially profiled. I mean, because they're basically...
In high school, when you attended school, you went to FSU too.
Yes.
So
And UM. Don't cut out UM. Hurricane fans will be really upset.
When did you go to UM?
After FSU.
For what? A master's?
Long story.
Okay, we don't have 10 days.
Yeah.
Okay, growing up, did you see it in high school? Did you see it in college? Did you see it at UM?
Listen, because people didn't know I was Jewish, you'd sit there and get in around a group of people and they'd make Jewish jokes, right? Because they didn't know you were Jewish. So you could automatically feel the racism in that one moment. But until you were around people, you didn't really know it until they said something. And the reason they said something is because they didn't realize you were, right? If you're African American, it's automatically, it's there, it's out in front, you know, for job interviews, for police, for walking the streets. It's just out there, and it has to be, nobody can experience what they experience. So when people say racism in the United States is dead, I don't believe that at all.
When you grew up in high school, did you have African American or black friends?
Absolutely.
And when you brought them home to Manglewood, right? Manglewood? That's in Palmetto Bay for people who don't know what that means. Was it strange?
Not for me.
Okay. You know, it's interesting. As soon as Oscar finishes the camera. Oh, good. So just FYI, WEDR is owned by a guy named Mr. Rivers. In the 60s, he only hired one type of people. You know what they hired? That was a black radio station. Jews. You know why? Jews weren't prejudiced. Herb Levine owned who ended up owning all the Spanish stations. Ron Miller, our father. We could keep going down. So it's interesting. Jews don't know the difference. We're all the same. So, but in high school, did you see some of your white friends?
Oh, yes. There were definitely, I won't say what high school I went to, but there was definitely, when I went to high school in the late 70s, there was definitely racism in our high school. And I'm hoping that the people I went to high school have grown out of that. But I'm sure it's still there.
Was it racism or just they didn't know how to act among Afro-Americans?
I was probably a little bit of both.
You know, it's very touchy because, you know, if we're not careful, I say non-blacks, they all hang out with themselves so they don't even know how the other races are. And that's part of the problem with part of Miami. It's so divided up.
Yeah, we have to get we have to move. I wrote something for the council yesterday. We have to move forward on that. We have to.
David Singer's a councilman of Palmetto Bay, but this is not about Palmetto Bay.
Yeah,
at
this is
all.
not about Palmetto Bay. We have to get over the fact that there are different type people. There are different people from different countries. There are different sexes. There are different sexual orientations, and take people for the good in them, or reject them for the bad in them. It can't be about, there's not one. There's not one bad police officer. There's not one super great police officer. You're always going to find a little bit of everything in your population that you're examining, right? Not everybody's good, not everybody's bad. We just cannot classify people in that way anymore.
In the past, we painted with all one brush.
Correct, absolutely. And I sit there and go back. I use the Holocaust as a jumping board. Cuban Americans use Castro as a jumping board. African Americans use slavery as jumping. Everybody has that unique background where we all have something in our past that we go and we base our life on, that we bring up and we try to share with other groups.
It's a real touchy situation. As you know, the couple police chiefs, the one in Houston, who I just love, he just said, "President Trump, what are you doing?" He spoke out against President Trump. He said, we're on the front lines. We want this thing to get better, not to get worse. The chief from Coral Gables took a knee in the middle of a protest. So the police officers want it better. And if we're not careful, we're going to go back to the 80s. And crime's going to go up in the inner city because there's going to be no policing because they're scared to do anything. Police officers.
I 100% support our police. Village Palmetto Bay has the best police I've ever met in my entire life. They're great. I mean, like I said, there could always be one bad
clarify
apple.
your police departments.
Our police department is basically Miami-Dade County's police department that
was trained by Miami-Dade.
Yeah, they're great. They're the salt of the earth. They are great. They're the friendliest, nicest people, most professional people I've ever met in my life.
We always think the police, the firemen, the paramedics, they're overpaid. They get this, they get that. This is right now. They're in a crisis mode, and it's tough what they're doing.
Yeah, I think they're underpaid. They're underpaid and overworked. But that's just
All police officers.
Yes, all police officers.
It's at one day that the danger is that one cop got shot in the head. I don't remember where he was, but got shot in the head. So this is a very touchy situation for everybody. Now,
so let's talk about for 2 seconds, the reason this started. And I think this could be the first time that we've ever seen something as grotesque as what happened to George Floyd. Being basically strangled to death on a street with handcuffs on by 3 police officers. And from what I just read on my way over here, the other 3 police officers are being charged now.
Today?
Yes, they're being charged. So, you got to sit there and say, this is why people are protesting, right? And protesting is the bedrock of this country. So people that don't like them protesting, sorry, they have a right to protest. And what's interesting is if you look at the protests, because I was watching CNN, CNBC, Fox. I actually did watch Fox. You see all groups. It's the first time you've ever seen that. We've had riots in Miami. Have you ever seen the different?
No, it's pretty exciting. It's all nationalities.
All nationalities, all age groups, all ethnicities, everything. They're all out there because we can't let this kind of, I consider it racial profiling, go on in this country. This is supposed to be the best country in the world. Let's lead by example. Let's not be a China or a Russia, okay? And let's lead by example and leave our country in better shape for our kids and our grandkids. And let's try to break that racial divide in some sort of systematic way.
Well, example is when the riots were about to break, I didn't see any major minority, we'll use minority, leader step up. Over Denzel Washington. Nobody stood up and said, hey, we should take it easy. As in the 80s in Miami, I can know from Miami, when the protesters were about to start, all the reverends, all the preachers, all the rabbis, all the leaders, business leaders, were in arm in arm with the protest. And there was less rioting at that time, and it ended up breaking out. But we didn't have any leaders, and nationally we didn't have any leaders. At the first day, they didn't say anything.
Yeah, the response from the politicians has been awful. They've all
Both
been
sides.
Both sides. They've all been staying on the sideline. They haven't come out and said anything at all.
Why did
worthwhile.
Obama, who I voted
Yeah.
for, why didn't he say the first day it's wrong? He didn't say anything. Not about protesting, about looting, about all that stuff. It's somebody's. The parents of these kids, they allowed that to happen. It's terrible.
We need a new form of politician that comes out and is not as worried about getting elected as doing the right thing. They have to speak up, right? When you see injustice and travesties out there, you got to speak up and not worry about your base.
Well, that's the challenge.
Yeah.
Is the way the system's set up? If you're House of Representative or your state house or your congressman, you're up for election every 2 years.
Correct.
Now we have all the people running for mayor. They're petrified. They have not stood up. One candidate stood up and says, "We need to fix this." Well, for the last 20 years since the last riot, we have not done anything to solve these problems. I don't think.
I
so.
think we've done. I watched Miami-Dade Mayor Jimenez on Fox. Actually, I watched him, and he explained the reason that Miami hasn't been affected as L.A. and New York.
I didn't see it.
Because there is some sort of outreach.
That's great.
I mean, and if you look at it and if you watched, I mean, L.A.'s been decimated. New York's been decimated. Philadelphia's been decimated. I think it was San Diego has been hit hard. I don't know what those other cities are doing.
But not as much as we have.
But apparently not as much as we have. And you got to give Miami credit for that.
Miami-Dade.
Miami-Dade credit for that, right? So I'm happy, and really every single night except for Sunday night where they lit 4 police cars on fire, and they went through Bayside, I mean, has been relatively calm, and it's been nothing peaceful protests.
Bike Tech, a bicycle shop,
Yeah.
lost all his bikes last night up in his Wynwood area. It's sad, but it's interesting. You are right. Except for the first night, we've moved forward on it. So it is a step forward, and protesting is healthy,
Protesting is very healthy.
and it makes our city or makes our county a better place. And Mayor Jimenez, who's had a tough job, he went from the virus to that.
Yeah.
So I think he's done a great job. And it's easy to say, why do we have a curfew? Well, it's not for the bad, it's really for the good people to get out of the way so police officers could react better, so they don't get mixed up.
Well, I personally don't think, and after watching the news stations, because I'm a news junkie for as long as I have.
Do you work for a living?
Yeah, I absolutely do work for a living.
The Berkowitz Group, thank you very much. Keep them hired.
It's not the peaceful protesters. It's they say it's outsiders. I never understood what an outsider was. You watch all these news stations, they go, it's outsiders.
I saw on Craigslist they were looking for protesters.
I said I don't know what an outsider is, but
They didn't pay me enough. So
it's I would say it's probably some fringe groups, okay? And to me, it looked like mostly young kids that are starting the problem with the riots, and I've actually seen protesters try to stop them. There was a CVS that was getting
in Dade County?
In Dade County the other day, and the protesters actually stood up to the rioters and said, "No, you can't, and you got to give them credit for that."
Carlos Jimenez, Mayor Jimenez, is giving awards recognizing those people stopping the criminal act. So hats off to those people. Hats off to Jimenez.
I mean, you got to figure out how dangerous it is. I mean, most of the rioters have some sort of weapon, a hammer or a shovel or something like this. The protesters don't usually have any kind of self-defense mechanism, but they're stopping it.
So on television, I saw young African-American black young lady screaming at 2 people vandalizing the building. "You're not black. You're not black. Well, you're ruining it for us." It was 2 women dressed up completely black except for the eyes, but you could see they were black. She was mad that these looters were not even part of it causing problems, ruining the protest.
Ruining the message.
So
And I think that's what I think actually.
hold on,
that's what
wait, Michael, you like to join us?
Oh, it's two men and a bottle of water.
Now
It can be 3 men and a bottle of water.
Join us.
Okay.
By the way, I like wearing these because honestly, my mom always wanted me to be a doctor.
And she must be very proud.
Yeah, she was very proud.
Hey, but a proctologist, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, so right now we're talking about.
Move over a little bit more. Okay, a little more. A
Okay.
little more. There we go. A little
Okay.
more. Back.
There we go.
There.
All right,
There.
Oscar Perez, you're doing a hell of a job.
Okay.
Okay, so continue. We're talking about racism in America, mostly racism in Miami, Florida, and Carlos Jimenez explained why there's not as much,
Correct.
but I still see
Outreach.
it.
Oh well, I think you'll see it for a while until people realize that there's still racism. I mean, when I talk to people, when I talk to friends, and they go, "Oh, there's no more racism." Well, how would you know? You're a white male.
Touche.
I mean, how do you know? You're a white male. You're not walking down the street.
Okay, so I used to live at 133rd and 69. So every time friends would pull up, there's a black kid or Afro-American, whatever way, he's jogging by. And they go, "What's he doing here?" I'll never forget it. I can tell you exactly where he lives. And I said, "Well, that kid's grandfather lived here before everybody, and his parents lived here before everybody. But because he's black, they go, what's he doing here?" And we forget Miami's a multiracial thing. And the other thing is going to say, when was the last time we, our viewers, shopped at a black store, black owned? When was the last time we went to a black restaurant?
I
owned
did.
by-
Jackson Soul Food. Thank you very much, Oscar. Over there. Just a plug for the folks over there.
Where was that?
That's in Overtown, about 10th Street and 3rd Avenue,
but-
more or less.
You go into a restaurant. I eat at Flavors in West Prime every Saturday and Sunday, except for now the COVID stopped. And it's multi-racial, everybody in there. But when you go into a restaurant and you're the only white person in the restaurant, how do you feel? You know, it's like we drive through a black neighborhood. What's the first thing a white woman does?
Oh no, I've had this
Click,
conversation.
click,
Yeah,
click.
absolutely. I've had this conversation. I won't tell you who it's with, but you could probably figure out. I go, if you were walking down an alley and you saw an African American walking to you, would you be concerned? And she automatically said yes. And I said, "You know nothing about the person." She goes, "Yes," because some people, or a lot of us, are pre-programmed
Okay.
to be concerned, right? So we got to figure out how to get that pre-programming out of our minds.
That's hundreds of years.
Okay, so here's a question for you. Do you like? I think you like snakes. All right. No, you don't.
To
See,
eat snakes?
he's an animal
I'm okay
guy.
with snakes. The only thing I don't like is spiders.
Okay. So when does a little child become afraid of snakes?
When their parents tell them to be afraid of snakes.
Exactly.
Right?
Bam.
Okay, absolutely.
All right. So
Well, we did a talk show, Oscar and 3 or 4 other people, and there was a city manager in North Miami who happened to be black. A black publisher was there, a black PR lady, and then 2 people that happened to be Hispanics, and they would call me the white guy. And at first I was offended. Then I realized we had the conversation. They brought it up, said, "All right," and I said, "Well, I'm a little offended." But then what I realized that inside of us, there's something that's back there. As liberal as I think that I am, right? It's like it pops up. Where does that come from?
you have to be liberal. You live in horse country.
You are pre-programmed.
Okay. So
And you know what? Your pre-programming may not only be your parents, but it may be what shows you watched when you were a kid. If you watched or Cowboys and Indians or police shows or something like that. That's what you were exposed to, right? Somehow that exposure needs to change to some degree.
So part of the big political question is, do we and politicians treat different groups, different tribes of people differently? And the answer is yes.
Absolutely, based
Because
on their base.
Right?
On their base, right?
Right.
So they'll sit there and they play to their base, and they won't be honest with. We were just talking about this before you walked in. The politicians will not be honest with the overall people that they represent because they find it a necessity to play to their base. Okay, which is a terrible thing. I mean, both sides of the aisle. Nobody.
Biden doing that
says-
now?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean,
Fight
listen,
that black church
I'm
down.
an independent. So I mean, politicians.
We
can't,
know that you're very
yeah,
independent.
politicians can't even agree on anything when they agree,
Right.
right? So you
He's
agree.
He's one of them.
Yeah, so you and I, yeah, me. So you sit there and agree with a politician on this is both parties. The Republic, it's like playing football, right? They won't give an inch. They won't give an inch because of their political party. They won't say, okay, you're right on some things, but let's tweak it a little, or we're right on some things and let's tweak it a little. They have to play to their base because that's the only way they can get elected. They're not politicians by far are just not the most honest people in the world. Here's another question for you guys. I'll ask you both.
You have a question or a statement?
I'll give you a question. Okay. What politician?
deep breath.
Wait, stop. What politician do you guys admire? Oh, sorry. What politician do you admire? Do you have a politician that
Yeah,
you admire?
one out of office.
No, you know who I admire right now? The one now,
Yes.
the mayor of Atlanta.
Okay.
I just think that she is.
Because she did what?
She stood up and
Yeah.
took care of. She's talking, and if she doesn't get reelected, life goes on. But she's talking her stuff.
I bet you if I asked you what sports athletes you admire, you could come up with a list of 20 of them.
Well, I can tell you one that everybody in the United States should admire is the one who got banned from football. He was right.
It's
Now
still-
he's right.
Now he's right.
Yeah, a peaceful protest. People banned him. The NFL thought he was dirt. Now look at him. He was right. A peaceful protest. But I have to tell you a story now because I'm going to forget it.
Okay.
So-
and then I'm going to go back to my
Okay.
question.
10 years ago, not 10, 14 years ago, I'm at the collection with my older son, who's 25%, he's biracial. His two friends that are Afro-Americans, me, and one other kid who looked like a thug. But all these kids have plenty of money. All three kids have their hat on a little crooked. So we go into at the auto show. They have all the different manufacturers, but there's one dealership that was allowed to have their own collection. So you're allowed to go behind the ropes, but some people are allowed to go in the cars. So I show up with my, these kids. And one of them, uncle played the NBA. So 3 of the kids are working on Wall Street right now. Okay. You know Jakari. Remember Jakari Birdsong?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, Daniel Machino, my son. So I said, can we go and look in the car? Everybody else, all the white people are in the cars. Going in these fancy cars. That car you can't go into. So I take my team, those 4 kids, we keep moving on. But I call one of their biggest customers, Leslie Bowe, who happened to be black, who has 4 cars from collection. I say, Leslie, I just want you to know, they racial profile my son and kids. He called the owner called that salesperson. This salesman is chasing down auto show. Mr. Miller, come back.
What color was Leslie?
Leslie was black, but he had 4 cars and he had money. But these kids looked like they didn't have money and they were black. That was racial profiling.
Absolutely.
So these kids, they didn't think anything of it. I was totally insulted. It was just me. Be one
Okay,
thing.
if you're pulled over by the police, would you automatically put your hand on the steering wheel?
I do,
Do you?
but I've been arrested a lot of times.
I don't think there are too many.
I put my hands out the window.
I don't think there are too many. I actually do that too sometimes, but I don't think there are too many people that actually think of, okay, I better put my hands up here.
Okay, but here's a good question. Did your father or mother say to you, when you get pulled over, put your hands on the wheel?
No.
No. An Afro-American, what would they say? To the kids?
Absolutely.
Right. So you say,
But we learn from experience. I mean, listen, you probably know this about me. My dad was a Holocaust victim, right? So I go back to my dad's experiences and I bring it forward to today, and I go, well, there was definitely racism back there then.
What was it?
What can I do?
What kind of racism? Against Jews?
Jews against the gays, against gypsies. I mean, they there was more than it was more than Jews.
Oh, you know that famous saying, right? Michael, you want to say it? When Hitler's marching through, they went after the Union. Nobody stood up for the Union. There was no Union. Then he went after the Italians. Then he went after this. Then he finally was going after the Jews, but nobody was there to stand up for me. Okay? This is exactly what this is about.
Yes.
We're not standing up for them. So one day,
So we need to, and I think it's moved forward if you look at what's happened and the protests. So it gives you a good feeling that if you look at the protesters come in every shape and size.
What was that, Oscar?
He wants me to look at the camera.
Okay.
Oh,
So
he wants you to look at the
I have an
camera.
experience I wanted to share with you.
Thank you, Oscar.
I was on a board of a condominium association. Right? I won't say which one, the one across the street. And there was a protest, and they wanted the residents wanted to throw everybody off the board. I said, okay. They held some signs that said the board wants to bring in a highly management company, and then there'll be a Latin over here, and they're going to steal all the money. It was like, and I discussed this with Oscar a year ago, when as soon as I saw Hialeah, I said, oh, here it comes. It's going to rear its ugly head. So on one hand, we're saying, okay, we tried to be equal, we tried to share, but immediately, if all else fails, run to the race card.
That's right, constantly.
But isn't that
but
politics?
there's three people here that have this white privilege, right? That we just think it's normal the way we live our lives, but it's not that. I'm seeing that as old as I
No, that's
as I get.
the first thing I said to Grant
Grant.
when I walked in
I'm
here.
Grant.
That's right, Grant, is you'll never be able to walk in African American shoes because you don't know what they experience when they leave their house.
So how about this? Do you think that a black guy that walks into a church that's filled with white people is afraid? And do you think if a white guy walks in a black church, all right, that he's never been in, and they're all black except for him, do you think the feelings are the same? What do you think, Professor?
That's interesting. I've walked into black churches before for funerals, and I didn't feel
And it's
uncomfortable. And I didn't feel uncomfortable.
Whose funeral? Do you remember?
Rocky. He was softball umpire.
Okay, that's a very good one. Right.
Okay, remember
But
him years ago?
Right.
And I didn't feel uncomfortable. I'm sure somebody who took an African American, they walked into a church, they might feel uncomfortable.
All right.
So we were raised as Unitarians, so I'd actually never been.
Okay, let me clarify.
Ne-
Our parents were Jewish. Our great-grandparents were Jewish.
Yeah.
Our family came from Germany and Ukraine, both sides.
So I'd really never been in a synagogue before, but a lot of my parents' friends were Jewish. So what was the point? Then the only time
Now he's a real Jew.
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
I
he
only
married Jewish
and I
guys,
only
didn't you?
became more comfortable with it when I found out that my wife started practicing, then my children were. Then I found out that my great grandparents were Orthodox. Right?
Which side?
Your maternal.
You guys are
Grandma.
related, right?
What?
you guys are like, what side?
Okay.
It's quiz.
He's trying to be on the other side. Listen, we did a DNA testing. We just wanted to make sure we had the
Okay.
same mother and same father.
Okay,
All right.
so we got more than 2 minutes, but we're gonna go COVID. You want to talk about COVID? Not Al COVID.
You know what? I think it's time to get back to somewhat normal. It's affected. The company I work for owns numerous shopping centers. I was lucky enough to be on your program this morning. As long as people wear masks, of course, I'm a big proponent of wearing masks and not spreading my germs.
That's why we got.
The glass. So I think it's time to get back to normal. I understand people who don't want to get back to normal, who are afraid out there, as per your last guest. So you can't. I don't think it's time to push people, but we got to go back to the economy, rolling the economy as best we can, and this is something that happens. Nobody expected it.
You guys have?
We 5, 6 shopping centers.
So one of the unfortunate things that's happening to the general public is politicians are able to do Zoom meetings now, right? And they're getting away with murder. That people cannot voice their opinions because they're used to being there, and you're looking straight at the politician, which is don't mess with me right now. And Oscar's nodding his head. So, folks, if you have any zoning stuff, this is the time to get it through right now.
Actually, if you're going to be true, Palmetto Bay has stopped all zoning until.
Oh,
until
too
we can
bad.
unblock-
Okay, we talked about getting the economics back. We talked about COVID. I think you've made some very good points about it. If you don't feel comfortable, don't. But law offices, as one of your friends said, Did he go back to work to the office?
No. What's going to happen is the COVID is really going to change the dynamics of how you work, because I think people are realizing that they don't have to drive right to a meeting. You can just have it on Zoom. Okay, you don't necessarily your workforce doesn't necessarily have to be at work to actually get things done.
Is your office back up and running?
Our office is running with the people who want to come in, and the people who don't want to come in haven't come in, and it's very effective. Okay, so office buildings are probably going to people that are in office buildings. It's going to change the dynamics of office buildings. And especially traffic. Hopefully, this will trickle down and really have a positive effect of traffic if people work and they do Zoom meetings. Can you imagine if you didn't have to go drive to do a sale or a sale?
I've seen it is. I think as soon as it becomes a regular way to do business, more acceptable, that people will be easier to deal with. We have 3 people that are working outside the office, 5 people that are working inside the office, but we've been having work done across the globe through the internet for years. At first, I thought it was terrible. No,
I think
it's
it's
okay.
great.
Yes.
Okay, we got to wrap it up. So,
We have to
how
wrap
old's
it up.
how old's your oldest son?
26.
And how old's your youngest son?
12.
And how old are you?
Too old.
How old are you?
57. Wait, don't forget about my 23-year-old.
I'm not counting him. Okay.
Yeah, you have a
so when your son is 6, you're going to be 63 when he graduates high school, and you're going to be 67 when he graduates.
That's if I live that long. I'm just surprised that you and I have been able to sit down for 30 minutes, okay, and not run around.
Well, we're trying. Listen, I think this is a great subject, and I think we like to meet. By the way, to wrap it up, you got about 10 seconds. You want to talk about Palmetto Bay?
Yeah, I'm definitely running for District 2 again. Right now, I'm running unopposed. My job at Palmetto Bay is definitely not finished. There are certain things that I'd like to see accomplished. I think Palmetto Bay has been somewhat mismanaged over a period of time, and I'm there to protect and help residents.
So I got a question for you. If you are fortunate enough to
your
be
mic.
reelected, will this be your last term, David Singer?
Well, it has
Make
to
a
be,
commitment
it
right
has
now.
to be my last term in Palmetto Bay. So there you go.
Okay. One thing about David Singer, there's no gray with him. It's black or white, and we look forward.
Except for the beard.
That's good.
Next time
touche.
you see me, I may not have this.
Listen, it's our honor to have you here, and
Thank
I've
you.
known David since I don't know, a long time.
Very long time.
Yeah, I have to tell you this story. I gotta wrap it up.
Oh my
This is the
God.
best story. So I met David Singer on the baseball field. He just got divorced, or just about to get divorced.
Whichever.
Yeah, he's on the fence watching his son play. His ex-wife to be, is badgering him, beating him up. I'm just whooping him. And David's watching the game. She's screaming, and David didn't move, didn't say a word. Just watched his son game while his ex-wife berated him, and I give you credit.
That's what's trained me to be a politician. I mean, think about it.
Okay, let's wrap it up here.
Okay, thank you very much for inviting me.
David Singer, thank you. Oscar,
3
thank
Men
you
of
very
Water.
much.
It's a great time.
And as we always end it, Grant Miller here. Have a great day.
Bye,
Thank you.
guys.